Have you ever wanted to travel to the land of the pharaohs, the land of the pyramids, and investigate the last remaining wonder of the world, the Great Pyramid? Well, you're in luck today because I'm going to take you on a virtual tour of the inside of the Great Pyramid. I'm Ken Klein, your host, and I'm glad you've come to take this tour. We begin our tour by traveling down the descending passageway. The descending passageway goes hundreds of feet downward at a 26-degree angle, all the way to the portion that was actually dug into the granite rock of the base of the pyramid. And there we find the bottomless pit. The bottomless pit is an apt name because in almost every culture in the world, there is an idea of hell or some place of perdition where evil souls would go to pay the penalty for their sins. The Great Pyramid not only has a bottomless pit, but it also has a deep abyss. And when we go down there, you're going to see it. Now, we're coming up to a place in the descending passageway where we come in contact with what is called the well shaft. You see that door there on the right. That's the entrance to the well shaft. The well shaft most probably was dug after the completion of the entire pyramid, and yet it is still used as a means of explaining very mystical and esoteric information about the Great Pyramid with regard to biblical prophecy. But most likely, the well shaft and the grotto, with the famous grotto in the middle of it, was built as a way of getting into the pyramid after a great earthquake where the priests could inspect if there was any damage done. As we continue down now to the very bottom of the descending passageway, we come, as I was telling you, to the well shaft and its accompanying chamber called the abyss. And it looks like it's finished in this film, but actually it's very crude and left unfinished. And most likely it was done that way because it wasn't never intended to be a tomb, although there have been many people that have tried to say this was a tomb where the pharaoh was to have been built in the first place. And now we're going to turn back and head back up the descending passageway. The descending passageway was built at a 26-degree angle, and actually in its construction quite amazing because it is only 1/4 of an inch off and it's over 300 feet. And that's an incredible feat to accomplish by the builders. The 26-degree angle was pointed at the star Alpha Draconis, which was called the Dragon Star in 2137 BC. And many people believe that the star that it pointed to has some significance in relationship to the condition of the human race, because there it is believed, according to the book of Revelation, that is where the angel wars took place and where Lucifer was cast out of heaven along with 1/3 of the angels. Now we're going to go up through the ascending passageway. There you see the granite plug. Actually, there were 3 granite plugs, and they weighed probably close to 15 tons each, and they were put into the ascending passageway to keep people from going upward into what is commonly called the Grand Gallery. Now, this particular channelway was supported by 3 girdles about 20 feet apart so that it could withstand the enormous weight of the plugs. Now we're entering the Grand Gallery, and to the right we see where the grotto, you'd find the grotto going down that entrance or even exit to the well shaft. The well shaft was dug from below, not from above, and so many people think that when the builders were finished plugging up the pyramid and sealing it, this is where they escaped, through the well shaft and down where it intersected with the descending passageway. Now, as we go and turn back towards the view of the Grand Gallery, we tilt down a little bit and we can see the entrance to the Queen's Chamber. Let's go in there first. Most of the time, you won't be able to go into the Queen's Chamber because it's fenced off now and has been for many decades. But this was built, it is believed, as an apartment, if you can imagine that, for the priests that would later study the stars through the Grand Gallery. It's not very large, and it has a gabled roof and is really outfitted in such a way that it would suit a place of rest and repose for the people that were studying the stars in the Grand Gallery. As we turn around here, we see a ventilation shaft. We just passed by it. We'll go back to it. And the ventilation shafts are different than the ventilation shafts in the King's chamber because these don't go all the way to the outside of the Great Pyramid, and they probably were just for that, ventilation shafts to bring air into the people that had to reside in there as they did their research. Now we're going to leave the Queen's chamber and head back towards the Grand Gallery, and you can see how nicely this has been built. It's very smooth and very uniform, and we're coming back out now towards the Grand Gallery, and we're going to continue up the Grand Gallery towards the antechamber. There's two rampways up the Grand Gallery, one on each side, and the slot in between that you can see right now that we're going up is where they dropped the 3 granite plugs that would be later lowered into place to block the ascending passageway. But you see the ramps on each side, and on the ramps you see slots in the ramp, which is where wood beams were placed to break the descent of the granite plugs that weighed 15 tons each. So they lowered them very slowly and used those slots with beams going across to the other side to slowly break it. As we look up at the Grand Gallery, you can see the ceiling and the gabled walls, incredible feat to build this. The ceiling is 28 feet up, and it kind of telescopes into about 4 feet, which was left open, and where the priests would watch the moon going across the top of the Grand Gallery, and they used that to learn how to make calendars. And then as we continue up, we're heading towards the end of the upper portion of the Grand Gallery, and there we can see the Great Step. And the Great Step was a platform in which 2 plugs were dropped that would fit into the passageway that you're seeing above it into the antechamber. And 1 plug was put into that passageway and 1 into the other end of the passageway that completely sealed off the antechamber. We're working through the antechamber. If we tilt back up just a little bit, up there, go up into that chamber, go up, and there you can see the boss. And the boss is a very esoteric seal that was put there by the builder. And we don't have time to talk about that right now, but it's a very important feature of the antechamber. Here, as we pass through the antechamber, we look back there momentarily at the Grand Gallery, but you can see 4 slots in the south wall of the antechamber. And those slots were for ropes that allowed the builders to drop the 3 enormous portcullis slabs. If we back up just a little bit, we can look up, and you can see one of the portcullis slabs that was dropped into place by ropes and came down to rest on the floor of the antechamber. And there were 3 of them, and you can see one right there above. And now we'll go back down past the slotted wall, and we'll head our way into the King's chamber. The King's chamber, right in that passageway was another one of those granite plugs dropped on the Great Step. Now we're going into the King's chamber, and this chamber was a perfect rectangle. The builder was very concerned with making everything symmetrical, mathematically accurate. There we see on the south wall one of the ventilation ducts. There it is right in your screen now. And that goes directly outside of the pyramid, and it points right to the stars in the belt of Orion. There's another one on the other side, and that particular ventilation shaft makes a left turn and then a right turn and goes out and points right at the star Alpha Draconis again, pointing to where something significant happened in the universe, in our galaxy. At the other end of the King's chamber is the coffer. It's broken at one end, most likely when they tried to take the lid off of it, and they did, and they found nothing inside. That lid, they think, is in Saudi Arabia now. That coffer is actually too large to put through the passageways of the King's chamber, so it had to be dropped in from above, which means that the normal funerary practices of the Egyptians wasn't observed in the King's chamber, where allegedly Khufu's mummy was buried, but there was never any mummy ever found in there by the grave robbers of Al-Mamun and his men. But you can see how intricately it was cut, the precision of it. That was solid block of granite. They cut down into it. Nobody knows how it was done, but it's under a great deal of speculation, with many people thinking that it was actually the tomb of Khufu, and the whole pyramid they think was the burial tomb of Khufu. We're going back out now through the Grand Gallery. We're going to take a look up at the top of the Grand Gallery, and there we're going to find an entranceway at the very most southerly portion of the Grand Gallery, and that passageway is most likely where the builders escaped when they had to get out of the Great Pyramid, when they dropped the three plugging blocks down the descending passageway, blocked up the antechamber with the 2 plugs and plus the 3 portcullis slabs. They had to get out. This is the way they got out. Now we're going to go back down to the floor of the Grand Gallery, and we're going to head our way out. The Grand Gallery is a magnificent piece of architecture. There's nothing like it in all of Egypt. No other pyramids were built like this, with inner passageways and chambers. It's totally unique. And unless you know what you're looking at, you probably wouldn't be as impressed. But when you stop to consider the engineering challenges that confronted the designer of the Great Pyramid, you just can't help but marvel. How did they possibly figure this out with primitive minds? And that's when you look at all of the different anomalies concerning the Great Pyramid, you come to the conclusion that it couldn't possibly be a tomb. It had to be something more than a tomb, and it is more than a tomb. Unfortunately, we can't get into all the details concerning the Great Pyramid. We just don't have the time, but now we're beginning to make our way towards the doorway of the Great Pyramid, and I'm glad you made the trip with us, and hopefully you'll get our films and you'll get to the real story behind the Great Pyramid.